clock's a little off.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Okay, so,
but it is actually 6.
okay, great. I was waiting for that.
I know, but I think, well, it's not that far off, but it's a little off. Just whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Good evening. I call to order and welcome you to the Middletown, Ohio work session on aquatics on Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. Please join me for a moment of meditation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag. You will hear 3 taps of the gavel when it is time to stand and 1 to be seated. Please join me in a moment of meditation now.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk of Council, Ms. Skank, please call the attendance roll.
Mr. Farrell?
Here.
Mrs. Carter? Here. Mr. West?
Here.
Mr. Horn?
Here.
Mayor Slamka?
Here. Thank you. We will now go ahead and receive and file the special meeting documents, which I have right here. Just take us a moment.
Typically, we do that also by motion and a second.
Thank you, Ms. Skank. So do we have a motion to receive and file the special meeting documents?
Motion. Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded to receive the files. All of those in favor say, Ms. Skank, please call the roll.
Mrs. Carter? Yes. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mayor Slamka?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so next on the agenda is our Middletown Aquatic Feature presentations. I'd like to thank you all for being here. We are here today to hear about 2 potential projects for an aquatic center in Middletown that will seek some city financial contribution. We are not here today to make a decision, but to hear preliminary presentations. So our first presentation will be from the Atrium YMCA, followed by our second presentation from Splashdown Middletown. I'm very excited to hear about these 2 possibilities for our city. So we will begin with Mr. Tyler Roberts, Executive Director of the Atrium YMCA in Greater Miami Valley. Mr. Roberts, welcome. Please approach the podium. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. And on behalf of the Great Miami Valley YMCA, I just want to thank all the city leadership and council for giving us the opportunity to speak to potentially filling this gap for the community. I remember when the city leadership a few years ago approached us about potentially filling this gap for the community. One of the things that we just thought to ourselves was, if it's a need, we'll be there.
Just want to make sure that
thank you.
So that the audio picks you up, and that just make sure that we can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So one of the things starting off with the YMCA has a long history in aquatics. It's one of our expertise. Even going back, clear back to 1885 at the Brooklyn YMCA was our first indoor pool. Quickly that became, it was actually back then called a swimming bath, and by 1891 was the first YMCA natatorium. Over time, the YMCA felt that that was a continued need, and in the early 1900s, the Salem YMCA introduced the first concept of group swim lessons. And so that was the first need where we're like, hey, there's a high amount of drowning amongst youth, even in the early 1900s. We need to fill this gap as the YMCA. Fast forward to 1909, where the YMCA launched a program that was a nationwide program from a local YMCA in Detroit, where every man and boy in North America knows how to swim. And a lot transpired amongst aquatics in the YMCA between 1909 and 2008. One of which being a fast forward to 2008, where the Atrium Family YMCA was built, and there were several needs and several reasons why that YMCA was built. One of which was a partnership with Atrium Hospital, where a gap was needed to be filled surrounding some physical therapy, particularly with a therapy pool, a warm water pool. As the hospital, one of the items was not wanting to get into owning and operating a pool, a therapy pool. So that's where the YMCA was able to be a strategic partner, being the experts in aquatics, being already responsible for 12 pools ourselves, put our hat in the ring to potentially fill that need and work with that partnership with the hospital. Currently, the YMCA is operating, like I mentioned before, 12 pools as well as an outdoor water park at the East Butler YMCA. And one of the reasons why we're able to maintain those pools for such a long period of time, some of these pools being built in the 70s that are still operational and functional today, is because of our expert maintenance staff, our ability to be able to use our resources with the YMCA network across the country, as well as our very strong Ohio alliance here locally to walk through troubleshooting anything that might arise with these pools. Speaking of one of those pools, this is the outdoor aquatics park at the East Butler YMCA. One thing that we're very proud of is this aquatic center is about 20 years old now, and it almost looks brand new. Even as recently as this year, we've made close to a $50,000 investment in this pool in this year alone. And when you walk through that pool, walk through that slide, it looks brand new 20 years later. And we're hoping this pool is here 50, 60, 70 years down the road as we keep and maintain these pools in aquatic centers. So now to the fun part, kind of talking about the potential aquatic center here in town at the Atrium location. So this is a plant that's on the backside of the Atrium Family YMCA, and it's very simplistic, but also robust in the features that it could potentially serve. Our pool is designed, our aquatic center is designed to really meet the needs of the family unit and be holistic in the approach of being able to serve all. So one of the features can be from the center area of that pool can be very much of a traditional pool where swim lessons can take place, group exercise classes, active older adult classes in the water, outdoors, all can be taking place in that center functionality of that pool, as well as a zero depth entry. And if you look at the front portion of that pool, which we'll show a little diagram of what that will look like here in a minute, zero depth entry to make it very accessible, as well as to create almost like a water feature where a jungle gym can be supported from youth, from toddlers, can be interactive, clear to teens, preteens, and adults with that outdoor slide. An example of the outdoor slide potentially is there's a myriad of options for this right around in the price range that we'll lay out in the budget later on in the presentation. But right now you're looking at a slide that's about 26 feet in the air. One of those runs of the longer portion of the slides is about a 96-foot run, the shorter being a 72-foot run for that slide. And that kind of being one of the key features on the backside of this aquatic center. As well as the water feature that I was mentioning in the front. This is just an example. There are several different options in this area, but a lot of splash features and things like that for youth, for a family unit to be able to enjoy and interact outside of just the rectangle, hole-in-the-ground square pool. So a pool similar to what we just showed you in that design can range anywhere from, depending on the features, the apparatuses, and the functionality of it, will run you anywhere between $2.7 to $3 million. There's a lot of wiggle room in that on different features, priorities as well, but this is a pretty standard budget for that, including the entire plant of the pool, landscaping, pool deck, everything. So one of the reasons that we feel having the aquatic center at the Atrium Family YMCA helps us with being able to make this pool sustainable. That $2.7 to $3 million price tag goes up by close to $1 million. The second you start adding a parking lot, which already pre-exists at the Atrium Family YMCA, added utilities, which already exist at the Atrium Family YMCA, and also adding on the pump rooms and other features that the YMCA itself would already have there. So very quickly, if this exact pool that I just showed you was built somewhere else, you will be seeing between about $600,000 to $1 million on the parking lot alone, plus utilities. So potentially upwards of $1 million added onto that for that exact pool. So with that being at the Atrium Family YMCA, one of the things that we want to make sure that if we are able to fill this gap for the community, if we're charged with the city to be able to help fill this gap, is at the YMCA, our goal is to make sure finances are not a barrier. That's one of our guiding principles and one of our founding principles. So for anybody that walks through the door, walks through that pool gate, is finding a way to make that pool accessible for them and affordable for them. The way that we do that is through fundraising of our own, making sure that our own operations are sustainable. That way we are able to make sure that when someone walks through the door, we will find a way to make sure that works for you. And the way that we remove that barrier is a program that we have. So we've had a long-standing scholarship program, but recently in the last couple of years, we've instituted a program called Membership for All. And that Membership for All is to address a couple different needs. One is the barrier of the application, the barrier of access. So we tried to simplify our process, took a very hard look at what does it take to get through that scholarship process at the YMCA. And one thing that we're very proud of is the Membership for All program. It just requires one document, and that's a 1040 document. And we recognize the fact that when you walk in the YMCA, you want to try to figure out and explore how can that barrier be removed, how can you afford it. Most of the times, none of us are going to have that 1040 on us going into there. So that's why with the Membership for All program is you are able to get access that day, even without that document, for those houses who qualify for $65,000 and under. We do give you 2 weeks to be able to go out and provide that documentation, and during those 2 weeks, you're able to still utilize the YMCA. If you had that motivation today to go in and begin your health journey, begin whatever journey that the YMCA can help you fulfill, that day you'll have access. And we work with you over the next 2 weeks to make sure that all your documentation or access to that 1040 is sustainable and is able to be there. And for those who come back on that scale and say, hey, you guys gave me this rate, and there's some extenuating circumstances that we feel, hey, we still can't afford it, we have another program called Extra Help that dives even a little deeper into that and be able to provide help for that family. So, for example, for that Membership for All, one of the things as we spoke to city leadership and thought about ourselves is obviously we want to be able to offer a day rate. And one of the things about the day rate is the YMCA currently has a day rate, but an added benefit of having a reduced day rate for Middletonians, people living in Middletown, that they'd have access to. So reducing that day rate from like $15 for an adult to $10 and from $10 for youth down to $5. And so, for example, the median household income in Middletown is right around $47,000, $48,000. On our Membership for All program, for a family of 5, for example, our family membership is traditionally $85 a month. On that Membership for All, for a household, not below, but at the household median income, that drops it down to $34 a month. So let's say that you, whether it's to the outdoor pool or to the YMCA, if you were wanting to enjoy the aquatic center 2 to 3 times a week as a family, as a teen, that drives you down, let's say you visit 2 to 3 times, that drives you down to about 56 cents per person per visit. So for less than $3 a visit, that family would be able to enjoy a day out at the aquatics park. If it rains, they can go inside and play basketball, and it drives it down to a much more affordable rate. At the day pass rate, which we'd still be willing to offer, and still would be offering, that same 2 adults, that's $20, 3 youth, that's $15. For that one visit, it pays for the entire month, plus the rest of the access to the YMCA and the YMCA's network. So through our Membership for All program, we try to strive to make sure that those barriers are removed, and we're able to make it as affordable as possible to have access to some of these resources, including what would be this outdoor aquatics park. One of the programs that we feel that the YMCA delivers the best is our Safe Around Water program. We had over 200 youth in this program this year alone. And it's a nationally recognized program that the YMCA has created, adopted, and implemented. And the Safe Around Water program, in its simplest form, is just to teach kids how to be safe around water and in water. how to jump, push, turn, grab, if they get in trouble themselves, what to do, swim, float, and swim. So from front crawling to going onto your back to rest, to front crawling again, just to get to the edge of the pool, edge of the water, edge of the river, and then reach, throw, or don't go. Basically, what do you do when you see one of your friends in trouble? So we are very strong about this program, and this program is already ran at our indoor pools, and this outdoor water park would increase the ability for us to be able to deliver that program. So another benefit of the Outdoor Aquatic Center being out at the Atrium Family YMCA, being a part of the YMCA's network, is you have access to every YMCA in the Great Miami Valley network. You have access to even the East Butler Pool. You have access to everything that's offered on site at that location. At Atrium alone, over 30 group exercise classes, 2 basketball courts, an indoor therapy pool, foosball, table tennis, wellness center, indoor lap pool, family programming. You have everything that you would be able to access as if you were a traditional Y member, which you would be. And that's one of what we feel like we are able to deliver is not just an aquatic center, but a holistic approach to the aquatic center with the entire family unit that allows you to be able to enjoy a benefit throughout the summer without dependent on weather. Kids can go play at the aquatic center while mom and dad maybe go take a group exercise class, or vice versa. You can make a holistic approach to it rather than just a swim. In conclusion, we just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be able to present on this. We are very open to this model, but ultimately feel like we can best serve the need that's needed in the community, fill that gap, while also making sure that this pool's here 50 years from now in a sustainable model. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Roberts. If you would remain at the podium for a moment, are there any questions for Mr. Roberts about his presentation?
I have one, and thank you, Tyler, for your time. I'm looking at the estimate from Patterson Pools. What is their availability to begin if something like this were to go through?
Yes, their availability to begin for like the earliest would be if we were able to deliver a yes or a no in early February. They would be able to begin in the spring with actual like boots in the ground, shovels in the ground, and the permit process would start that February as well, that February and March. So their availability, they know that this could be a potential project, so we've had a lot of conversations about what does it need to happen for us to get on that schedule for a potential soonest open would be 2025 summer.
Okay, Tyler, great presentation. Appreciate the information. A couple things you said that really stuck with me was one thing is keeping this project sustainable. So if I know the answer to this, but I want to ask for everybody. You want the city to build it, but long term, you're not asking us for any dollars, correct?
Correct. So our goal would be able to maintain this pool through its lifetime, and be able to have it open 50 years from now, just like the current operations that we have.
Okay. And I noticed you talked about your expert maintenance staff. You talked about how it's countrywide, how you're already doing it in the area. And it's not just, so you guys are mostly Butler, Warren County, or kind of explain your area that you operate.
Yeah, so we're in the federated model. But we still have, with that federation model, we have the YUSA and its resources, as well as our local Ohio Alliance. So we are everywhere in Butler County except for the Lakota YMCA, as well as a portion of Warren County with the Franklin area as well.
Because I even saw, I was in Coleraine the other day, and they have an outdoor aquatics park.
Yep.
So it's not like you just have this one-off in this area. It's a proven concept.
Yes.
And that's what I like about projects is I bet on people, not the project always. And I know that the YMCA is, you do what you say, you back up what you say, and I really appreciate that about you guys. So that's really the main question I had. I just wanted to make sure there was no long-term ask or anything once the project's built. So.
Again, appreciate your presentation. You mentioned about a discount for people, the city of Middletown. How long can that be sustained? 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Or?
Yeah, so from initial concepts that we've seen on a similar model to this is usually a 15 to 20 year commitment to that. Never say forever, but definitely a 15 to 20 year commitment based on the dollars that would be being put up. So we would definitely be open to a long-term commitment on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler.
My question is, what about transportation? Is it possible that we could provide, the city or the Y could provide transportation for our youth to the atrium for?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a solution to that. I don't know if the YMCA has the expertise to fill that gap necessarily, but there's definitely other partners outside of just the city and the YMCA that could help support that transportation model. No matter where we would want to build this pool in the city, transportation is going to be a barrier somewhere.
Right.
So there probably will need to be another partner at the table outside of just building the pool and then operating it.
Right.
If we really want to tackle the transportation portion to that, it would probably take on another partner, as well as just like anything that we would have to do across the city, we'll have to figure out a way, people have to figure out a way to get to as well. But definitely a third party, I don't know if the YMCA would necessarily be able to fill that gap with our expertise.
I think it would be nice if we had an activity bus and it would transport to different activities throughout Middletown. I think that's
Yeah, in addition to the Clock
something we
Center,
could,
absolutely.
right.
And if I may, Councilmember Carter, that is something that we could work out with Butler County Transit Authority, and we will be meeting with them to see what the possibilities there to provide transportation for youth all over Middletown to get to the facility, regardless of who runs or operates it or where it's at.
Let me ask this, Tyler. So let's say the city agrees to build this. Naming rights is always a big thing, whether it's as large as a stadium or as small as a chair at Wildwood Country Club, right? So if the city builds this, do we have the ability to go out and get creative and say if X company wants to give us $50,000 or $100,000 to call it the so-and-so aquatic park, are you open to allowing us to go and essentially sell the name rights or get other people involved? Is that something you guys are open to as far as the YMCA?
Yeah, we would be very open to that. There would just need to be a conversation about the dollar amount for a naming right for that. This aquatic center is going to be a large attraction, so
Right.
it would have to be worth that. But absolutely, we'd be open to that.
So more than $5.
Yeah.
Noted.
I have another question, Tyler. On your East Butler, that's about 20 years old now. In recent years, I know, inflation's been a thing, especially with chemicals and even staffing, but what would you say on an average year within the last couple summers, really? Because, we're talking from Memorial Day to Labor Day, mostly. What do you think the cost is to operate that, whether it be from staffing, chemical, energy consumption, outside of the large ticket maintenance items?
Yeah, I would say, so very similar. This plant will be very similar to that size to begin with, and our finances are so engrossed within each other. But from looking at our model and looking at our expenses that we have currently right now at the East Butler Park compared to the performance that we've done on this particular park, it would probably be somewhere in the range of $250,000 to $300,000 annually on those fronts. And there's a lot of indirect costs that aren't really built into that, being a part of our association, from marketing and fundraising and some leadership. Like my time wouldn't be built into that pro forma, for example. So right around probably $250,000 would be a safe bet.
So I'm interested too, if you look at the Ys in the area, some are around major constructions of malls. So you look at your East Butler, it's right by, what's the name of the mall over there?
Yeah, Bridgewater Falls.
That one. So in my mind, do you see any sort of, this is an opinion-based question, but do you see any sort of piggyback? Do you think that this aquatic center has the ability to draw more people to that area in order to help with shopping, create jobs, retail, that type of thing? What's your thoughts there? Have you done market studies, anything like that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a draw. Anytime that you have something right off of a major highway, within a 2-minute drive off the major highway, to have a attraction to particularly that side of town, it's going to be one piece of the puzzle that's going to be able to help draw people from outside the community into it, as well from jobs and from different standpoints. I think any of us, when we look at moving someplace, we look at schools, we look at the housing market, as well as what are the other amenities in the area. One of the things that we love to hear, we've had several stories come across where we've had youth go off to college, and they're like, yeah, one of the things that really speaks to me is when we hear back from some of those youth is, hey, one thing that I miss about being at home is the fact that when I'm at school, I don't have my Y. I don't have my Y family when people move out of the area. So we definitely feel like an outdoor aquatic center like this could definitely draw people in for that.
Do you have any idea how many people go to the East Butler Y?
Yeah,
As far as the outside aquatic center, of course.
Yeah, I mean, this past summer, we are at the East Butler YMCA. It's really starting to pick up trend again, especially post-COVID.
Right.
And we're seeing about 200 people a day on those days. Like, let's say the pool's open 110 days. 80 to 90 of those days, we're seeing close to 200 people come through that pool.
How many people at a time do you think an aquatic center like this can hold?
I would say it depends on how you look at this. We've actually been having internal discussions on this because the capacity at East Butler, one of the things that we don't want to do is say, hey, we're closing the gate because we're at capacity. Trying to be creative with that because you're trying to mix in how many people are on deck, how many people are in the pool, how many people are utilizing the branch. So a pool like this, I think, could very well handle nation leader in aquatics states that traditionally for every 25 people, you need a lifeguard. So we could easily see potentially up to 5 lifeguards surrounding the pool at a time, as well as site attendants and things like that. So I think between in and out of the pool, anywhere between that 100 and 200 at a time, that would be pretty busy, but you could see that.
Mr. Roberts, Mr. Farrell had just asked about the potential draw, and he had asked if you had done a market studies. Have you done a market study for?
Not officially, no.
Okay, so what we're looking at is who could this draw, where they could be from, and who would come. So that would be interesting to find out, like what that could potentially be for Middletown, this atrium Y.
Absolutely.
I'd be interested in knowing that.
Absolutely. We'd be open to looking into that, definitely as far as like a formal study. For us, our goal always is to serve the families of Middletown first, and then be an attraction for those coming from outside the market as well. But our goal has always been to attack the family unit and be able to serve the family unit here in town, in the communities that we serve.
How long, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
I was going to say, how long do you think that would take, the market study, to do that?
I couldn't speak to that now. I would have to look into what that market study would entail and to go down that route. So unfortunately, I would not be able to answer that right now, truthfully.
And I assume that's something you would ask us to pay, or would you be willing to pay for that?
Just from the standpoint of, I would lean towards more. I think we'd be willing to look into it ourselves. But one of the things that I would say is for us to be able to enter into this project, I would be looking for the city to potentially front that cost.
Speaking of cost, you had mentioned that this pool that you're recommending, which is similar to East Butler, I have a couple questions. Is it, what the pictures that we saw, is that what ours would look like as well? We'd have one pool, I mean, one slide, correct?
So the East Butler slide has 2 slides with 2 runs. We would have 2 slides with 2 runs.
We'd have two, okay,
Yeah,
thank
the
you.
main difference is we would have in this particular plan, we would have a much more robust, at the front of that zero entry, robust offering where there's a feature there that is more of like a jungle gym slide, buckets, that is just a little different than East Butler that I feel is a little bit more robust as well.
And also with that, it sounded like the ask was between $2.7 and $3 million. Is that what you're asking? What amount are you asking from the city?
I think that's the project that we have here is in that range. There's other projects that are lower than that, and obviously there's projects that are above that. For us to build a sustainable pool that we feel like is an attraction, it would be within that range of that $2.7 to $3 million.
And a market study would be able to tell us how much exactly it would be and what would make the most difference.
Yeah, a market study would help us with that pro forma and things like that. Yes, absolutely. But there's also the play of what the market study says and what we feel as being the operator of it with our experience of what we feel sustainable and as a draw.
But really, the difference in pricing is largely from these numbers that I've seen. It's really about the size of the slide and the size of the part for the kids, right? With the
Mainly the slide. Yep. It's really your big variations happen within that slide.
So really, when it comes down to that, a market study is not really going to tell us if we need a third slide, though.
No, because the market study can come back and say, hey, put in at $3 million, increase that slide to be the size of Kings Island, and with enough volume, you're going to be able to sustain it.
Yeah.
From a market standpoint, there's a way to make any pool seem sustainable from that standpoint. But with our expertise us having a history of running pools, what it takes to maintain them, what's going to be an attraction, but not also be a financial burden on long-term maintenance, so that that feature is still there 20 or 30 years from now. That's more of where we would play into that fact. Even if the market study says, yeah, go bigger, we may not be able to.
One of the things from the market study I'm really interested in is that draw, that regional draw. What could that look like? What are we talking about? So that's one of the things I'd really like to see. Also, we have just one more minute before we're going to ask the next one, but we will have more time for questions after the next presentation as well. Where would Mr. Lawley, City Manager Mr. Lawley, where would the funds come from to pay for the atrium mask?
So that would be a decision that would be made by council. There are a couple means of financing an aquatics facility in Middletown. We still have approximately $1 million, a little over $1 million in fully uncommitted ARPA dollars to earmark. That has to be earmarked by December 31st, 2024 and spent by December 31st, 2026. Additionally, we still have the $3 million in the downtown development ARPA encumbrance that it does not look like we're going to be able to come anywhere close to spending that money by the time we get the downtown development plan accomplished. So we could divert a portion of those funds to the downtown development towards this project. And then additionally, for example, if we, in the general fund, if we took the general fund reserve down to 40%, that would give us an additional $3.6 million out of the general fund to use towards this project. So you're looking at the possibility of having nearly $7.5 million from the general fund that we would be comfortable with, and remaining ARPA dollars to put towards this project.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Tyler. And hopefully Mr. Roberts, hopefully we'll be asking you some more questions after the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I now invite Adrian Scherer, board member of Splashdown Middletown, Inc., and our second and final presenter this evening to the podium. Ms. Scherer, welcome, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
First, I would like to say that the YWCA and the YMCA both have a long history with my family. My grandchildren, who are the utmost little swimmers, learned at the Atrium Y. And when I was an adult and was a boater and a skier, I figured out I didn't know how to swim. I just knew how to stay alive in the water. So I went to the Y as a 40-year-old and learned how to swim. So we have a long history. My son, they're kind of almost the same person. He even worked at the Atrium Y for a while. Taught a class called Tough, because he is an extreme athlete and loves the Y. Anyway, I would like to let you know that more than 3 years ago, this gentleman, sitting up here in a tie, Merrill Wood, contacted me and he said, you know, I did sink or swim when they were closing all the pools, and I'd like to talk to you, since you run an incubator, about the idea of starting to talk about an aquatic center. That was more than 3 years ago. So we ended up with business cards that said, Merrill Wood, Splashdown Middletown, instigator, Adrian Scherer, Splashdown Middletown, enabler, because I went to all the meetings, and we put together a board and got our not-for-profit and all of that, which was easy for me because I run a small business incubator. So I would love to thank all of you for letting us come and do a presentation tonight after 3 years. We have been trying to do that for more than a year, and I really respect the new council for hearing what we have to say tonight. We tried previously to do a PowerPoint, weren't permitted to do that, so we came, my board members who are here with me, we came 3 minutes at a time to do a little presentation to let people know that we were still out here trying to get things going. So that is what we want to do, is put together some fun for the community. This is me telling you exactly who we are. When we get to the question and answer period, the other members of the board will probably chime right in and say what they want to. We have had a board that has held together through COVID, through all kinds of things, and we're just continuing to have meetings, and we never changed who was on that board. We were all committed to this cause. I cannot get this to change. Oh, I went too far once I got, that's what I do on my computers, double click. Not a good idea. Let's see. Okay. I want to tell you about what we know. We know from research and experience that almost all citizen-driven projects that come to Middletown take at least 2 years to get permitted to occur. A couple of examples are, this young couple came to the park board years ago and said, when we go on vacation in Florida, we play pickleball. And we have all of these tennis courts that aren't being used for tennis courts. Can we make them into pickleball courts? No, no, no. After 2 years, the council gave up and said, okay, now we all know how important pickleball has become to Middletown. We became the pickleball capital of the Midwest. And even though there's all kinds of new pickleball locations all around now, we were first, but now that there's others, the people who started here continue to want to come back here. There is absolutely no way to know how much money came to Middletown because of those 2 people who came to the city council about pickleball. There were hotel rooms and gas station stops and food on the run and food in between games and all kinds of things that occurred. About 19 or 20 years ago, myself and 2 men who realized that the city needed to be able to have staycations came to the city and said, we want to have concerts at Governor Square Park for free. And they said, that can't happen. There's no businesses down there. It looks like a war zone. People will pee in the streets and break windows. Well, 2 years later, we started the Broad Street Bash at Governor Square. And we had concerts at Governor Square for 15 years. Once we got started, we averaged 8 a year on Wednesday nights, and we grew it. The way I want people to understand that once you get committed to a project, you grow it, you strategize, and that's what I've been teaching people how to do for 40 years, how to grow their business. So the first thing we did was we started out with a local sound guy who would do it for free and a few little local bands who would play for free. That was year 1. And we had 500 people at a concert, and we were feeling pretty good about that, so we upped the ante. And we started with paying every band that played on the stage $100 per person that was on the stage to play for 2 hours. And over the years, we grew that to a place where we had a local band as an opening band, and then we had a headliner band, and for 2 years, every headliner band had to come from north of the Dayton Mall. And the next 2 years, every headliner band had to come from south of Tylersville, and they all had to commit that they would advertise that they were coming to Middletown, Ohio to play in a free concert where there was lots of cold beer and lots of property to look at with lots of architecture available. And over time, we grew to over 10,000 people following us. And if we went on our social media and said, hey, we're starting 2 hours late tonight because we had a big storm earlier today, people started coming 2 hours late. because they were really following us. That was because they followed their band to Middletown and they loved the bash, and then they followed the bash's social media. So the average band that played there, the local, each night that played, we paid $700 a night to the local band. The headliner bands were more expensive depending on who they were, how well known they were. If you had the bare naked karate girls or whatever they were called, they were neither bare nor naked nor karate girls. They charged a lot of money because they were well known. But that's how we grew the bash, and that's how you grow anything you decide in your heart you need to grow. So, one more indicator of how that growth helped Middletown was United Dairy Farmers corporate offices noticed that this store that's downtown had way more sales on Wednesdays. And they ended up giving us $5,000 a year so that we could keep the Broad Street Bash going. And the people who worked at the UDF were booked so heavily that they ended up having double the number of people every night work that we had a concert. Now, one thing we probably haven't really thought about. I hadn't really thought about this in hardcore until I started thinking about this presentation. But in the 1920s, all the way through the 1970s, the average house, most especially the average house in Middletown, Ohio, didn't have air conditioning. So when a family needed to cool off, what did they do? They went somewhere and jumped in a pool. And when they got home from the pool, and it still was too hot to be in the house, they sat on the front porch. And guess what? That was a sense of community that happened on the front porch. That was a sense of community that happened while they were cooling off at the pool. And those days are over. We don't have porches being built on the fronts of houses anymore. And people want to go to water, not to cool off. In fact, they're pretty comfortable in their air conditioner with their devices in their hand. But they want to go to an amusement park that's in the water. That's exactly what they want to go to. So, if you want to think about the amenities that a Splashdown Middletown facility could have, see, it's just, I'm going too far. Here is a picture of the amenities that Oxford chose. This is their aquatic park, and we've been there. We've even had meetings where the recreational director of Oxford came and did these presentations for us. And I will talk about these specific amenities and what they mean right now as I go through. But that's just a picture of what they did in Oxford, Ohio, which has a population in the winter, in the summer when there's no college students, of only about 6,500 people. But they knew that they were going to draw from other communities. Much as we know, we will draw from other communities as well. So, some amenities you might want to consider. An aquatic center has to have a zero entry, where you're either walking down a ramp, hopefully not as steep as that one, or steps with a handrail, so that no matter whether you're little or you're tall or you got arthritis or you got whatever, you can safely get into the pool. Also, there's an area in any good aquatic center that's less than 3 feet deep, so little kids can not be worried and be touching the bottom. And you know what? That bucket that we saw on the slide that Tyler had of water, kids absolutely love to challenge each other to guess when that bucket is going to fall on their head. They just absolutely love it. So that would have to happen at Splashdown Middletown. You can have a lazy river. Some advantages to having a lazy river is it's a marketing tool. You could either be an old person with arthritis and get in an inner tube and just float around and around and around in the lazy river, or you could get out of the tube and walk against the current so that you have low impact exercise happening. And really, senior citizens absolutely love that option, that they can do that. There's always an area where the water's 4.5, 5 feet deep, where adults could play volleyball, basketball. You put those nets up temporarily and they can challenge each other. And of course, there's the water that's exactly the right depth for dumping out when you came down the slide. Whether it's a whirligig slide, whatever kind of slide. I do know that the kind of slides we had at the pool when I was a child are illegal in Ohio because you could just fall off the side of them and die. These slides that they have nowadays are not nearly as dangerous. Guess what would be the appropriate features for a splashdown Middletown and Middletown to be based on our demographics, et cetera, but a feasibility study where they would tell us, based on your demographics, here's how much you could charge, here's where we think you should build it. One thing that's interesting, if you go back to the slide of Oxford, this is the going backwards button, but I'm not going backwards, not going anywhere. There it is that lane pool. Within like a 25-mile radius, there are no 50-meter lane pools. Anybody who is a serious swimmer, who wants to be a competitive swimmer, maybe even someday go to the Olympics, if they live in Middletown, they got to drive 25 miles to get to a 50-meter pool. And there are people who do it because they're serious swimmers. But if Splashdown Middletown built a 50-meter pool that looks like that, but also had the stands that you dive off of on the side, which was 25 yards, that would be the lane pool that is in most indoor locations. In fact, that's what they have at the Atrium Y, is a 25-yard. Swimming 25 yards twice is not the same as swimming 50 meters once if you're serious about being a competitive swimmer, because you got to turn an extra time and all of that. So that's just one thing that I would like to see us put with Splashdown Middletown that we could really market. We went around and met with the leadership of all the communities that surround us. And we know that the leadership in the city buildings of Monroe, Madison, Trenton, Franklin, they're all interested in us putting an aquatic center, because if we put it well, that is all easily accessible to Middletown from where they are. They are very interested in that. So, there are so many questions, I know, that need to be answered. This is about me talking to everybody. There's so many questions about costs. How much does it cost to build it? How much does it cost to maintain it? How much does it cost? Well, we've talked until we're as blue as the bottom wave on that slide to people about those questions. There are so many variables that the Y had the option and the time to put together an actual spreadsheet that said how much everything would cost. We haven't had time to do that and haven't had the information to do it, because we would love to have a feasibility study done that tells us where it should be, where the parking lot would be, how many acres do you need if you don't have a parking lot, where you put it, or you already have a parking lot. All of those things happen that decide the cost of it. And we can't get all of that together, but a feasibility study that would cost about $25,000 in 90 days to get from a very trusted organization, trusted to the city over and over again. And that is Bratstetter and Carroll. We already know how professional they are. We already know if they say they can do it for $25,000 in 90 days, that's exactly what they will do. We have spoken with 12 towns, all with a smaller population than Middletown, Ohio, about their aquatic centers. These are all Ohio cities, less than 50,000 people, most of them less than 45,000, who have aquatic centers. 11 of the 12 that we spoke with have made money every single year they have been open. Every single year. One city said, we just mesh it in with the rest of the expenses of the city because it probably does cost us about $50,000 a year to have that, but we think it's a responsibility of our city to provide that option to the citizens that are here. That particular community is a very diverse population, as do we, and they feel like that's the least they can do. In 1997, Miamisburg, which is right over there, they built their aquatic center. They have built it and they have operated it for 25 years without spending one penny of taxpayer dollars. In 2023, they found a leak in some of their plumbing, and they've already hired a company to tell them how can they improve their aquatic center, how can they fix this plumbing issue, and so they don't anticipate that they will be open in 2024 while all that work goes on, but they also anticipate that because they know how to do it, that they will be able to fix that and open in 2025 and still use no taxpayer dollars to do it. That's their history. So, here's some things I'd love for you to focus on. Maybe, yes. I'd like to focus on that happy family. They are so cute. What smiles. But I run a small business incubator. I teach people how to open new ethical businesses. And prior to opening the incubator for more than 20 years, I consulted with businesses about strategic growth, large corporations, middle-sized corporations, all of that. And here's what I know. No matter what you are planning, the very first question you have to answer in your mind is, who is your audience? Who is your audience? The way I see it, the people who work in this building work for you. You were just elected by us. I think we're the audience. So the question you need to ask yourself is, how do you meet the needs of us the best? With Splashdown Middletown, located we don't know where, wherever the demographic recommendations would come from a $25,000 feasibility study, or at the atrium. You have to decide what will meet the needs of the citizens the most. And that gets me all Twitter-pated. After 3 years, I feel like somebody hears us. And it's not just the 6 or 8 of us that are in the room talking about how to plan it. It's you, and it's them, and it's whoever watches this on television. So, I'm open to any questions and answers, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Scherer, very much for that presentation. Are there any questions or comments from the council members for Ms. Scherer? Mr. Horn.
I'd like to go first. Appreciate your presentation. So what I'm understanding here, and I have a length of questions here, so just give me a little rope here, Mayor. So what you're proposing is that the city provides land, they provide monies to build what's in this study right here, and then we also maintain it after that's done. Is that correct?
Well,
Yes or no?
Now, I can't answer that because every single aquatic center community that we spoke with, all of those 11 that paid for it every year and made money, They all have a different plan.
I didn't
Some
ask
of
that.
them
I
have a
asked,
plan
I asked the
where-
question is after it's built, the city is going to maintain it. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about the requirement is you're saying Miamisburg, city of Miamisburg, maintains that pool.
They do.
Okay.
And Oxford maintains their pool.
Okay.
And really, to bring you up to date on Oxford, last year, Oxford thought, well, you know, the students all go away. We got to keep some of the students here so that we have enough lifeguards. It takes an average of 14 lifeguards a day to run the facility that we saw the picture of. And so they went to Cincinnati. There's 3 or 4 different pool management companies in Cincinnati, and they interviewed them and got pricing from them, and they said, you know what, we'll just do it ourselves. And so they managed it themselves. I'm thinking to myself, if we knew that we were going to build Splashdown Middletown, we're not going to throw the first shovel of dirt next week. We've got plenty of time to get people certified to be lifeguards. It also would provide jobs for other teenagers to work in the concession stand and to clean up the locker rooms and all of that. So that to me is another economic development question, is how do we help teens have good and better and more interesting jobs?
Okay. So my next set of questions, and if there's another board member that can talk about the financial analysis, they can come up, or if you would like to answer those questions.
Mr. Horn, is that a market
This is
study?
what I was told that Splashdown provided, this financial analysis and the
And that is-
drawings and all the stuff.
What is
That is a Bratstetter and Carroll feasibility study for what town?
Allen, Texas, final report, Ford Pool Master Plan.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that your presentation is based off, and the budgets that's in here is based off kind of what the plan is for the aquatic center that you would like in the city, and I have
Well,
some
if
questions.
we once upon a time had 15 of those.
Okay.
And the budgets that were in them were all different, because it depends on whether they decide is your best place to put it.
Right. My questions are not based off numbers.
Okay?
Okay. My questions are based off of, again, the city or an entity having to maintain this. Because after it's built, then someone, probably the city manager and the parks department or the maintenance department, is going to take care of this. So my questions are based off of that. So then in item 6, and this is under main pool filtration, which has your pumps and your chemical equipments, okay? So you move down to the item 11, which has the site infrastructure. That's your consumables. That's your electric, that's your water, that's your gas.
Right.
What I didn't notice in the study was chemicals. So chemicals are consumable, so the chemical costs are not listed, but I did notice you had a contingency in there for $500,000. But then the question is okay, is that in that contingency? And then also, when you build something, you have startup, to run all the motors and everything else. Does that contingency also include from Memorial Day all the way to Labor Day? And close down?
The average well-working aquatic center in Ohio, most especially in southwestern Ohio, anticipates that we will have at least 80 days of weather over 80 degrees, which is when people say, okay, it's too hot, let's go to the aquatic center. The last 2 years, Oxford enjoyed 99 days over 80 degrees, and they made more money than ever.
Right.
And the numbers that are in that particular feasibility study don't really have impact on us until we find out where they think we should build it, what the quality of our soil is. I have learned from 2 different aquatic centers that the difference in what kinds of chemicals you choose, which is really dependent upon the quality of your water and how hard it is and blah, 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 blah. But man, it can make a big difference which chemical you are choosing, and you choose it based on your water quality. I don't know anything about water quality in that particular
And that's
town.
why I'm asking the question, because again, someone is going to have to maintain this. So in the first numbers, say this number is $3.2 million.
Okay,
So then you have to make sure that all the numbers are there for the chemicals for the first year of startup.
Right?
So that's what I'm talking about with just that. So that's all. I'm just asking questions on what I was given for information. So then my next question.
Oh, Mr. Horn, may I interrupt just a second? May I ask a question related to your question?
Sure.
Oh, thank you. I guess what it sounds like is, what I'm hearing is, who is going to run this? Are you asking that the city pay for, is that what you're looking at?
No, that's what she said. She said that Oxford runs their pool, Oxford Pool, Miamisburg runs their pool. Oxford went to the city of Cincinnati, which also I think has a pool system, and they said they tried to get a subcontractor potentially, and they said, no, we're going to continue to run our pool. So it's a city pool.
Right. But.
So that's all I'm asking.
And my point being, there are many options.
Yes, but at the end of the day, what you're wanting is you want a location where everyone in this picture and more can go to, enjoy, but the behind the scenes is the maintenance of this pool, which has, like I said, the consumables. And I'm just going off this report, and I noticed this is just a study, but this is a budget, just like the YMCA provided a budget, and they have their things in their numbers, but we're not concerned about that much because that's not going to be something that we have to spend money on. This is something we're going to have to spend money on, that it's going to have to be in there, even though other cities have it within their budget, and you've done your due diligence and say, okay, these cities say they're making money every year, great, or they're
Okay.
breaking even.
Okay, well, I will say this, and who knows, because we've been in this for 3 years, and I've talked to many corporations, and I've thought of many different plans, and the board and I have run over many different plans. There are corporations, not specifically here, but perhaps here, who will spend $2 million or $4 million for naming rights.
I understand.
And so that's a place where you can get money.
Okay. So then
Go ahead.
my next question is on in item 12 under soft costs, and I have a construction background, that's why I'm asking a lot of these questions. So normally, again, when you build something, like when I had to build something, in order for us to get the last 10% of our contract, it was called retainage. And you had to provide, and it was usually in the specifications, training and materials. And that materials might actually be the chemicals for that year. But the part that's concerning, again, is it's not in this study. And again, if we're going to do it, or someone else is going to do it, maintain this pool, you have to have training for startup, opening, and closing, and not just for the first year, for the 2 years, because we have attrition. We have people who
Go away to school.
Well,
whatever.
no, so much. I'm talking about the maintenance department. They get promotions. They decide to work someplace else. So we not only do we have binders, we also have to have this training. So that also has to be in consideration. And then, like you just mentioned, lifeguards. We have to make sure that we have lifeguards that are trained properly. How many lifeguards do we need on this size pool? YMCA said they need 5 on theirs. I'm assuming we're going to need 5 on this, which you have to maintain.
14.
Okay. So, and then also in here, and the rest of this, Mayor, will just be statements, just because now I see that this is a study and not someone's going to be able to answer my questions. So what you have to have with a pool, and this is also the YMCA's layout, is you have to have a PA system, which is not listed here. You have to have a fire alarm system, so first responders can be called. And you have to have a security system, so when folks are not supposed to be swimming there, they can be talked to by the other first responders.
Sure.
So that needs to be in this budget also, which I didn't notice. I'm just making statements. I'm not asking any more questions. On maintenance, everything has a manufactured lifespan.
Right.
So the pool liner or the pool PVC paint, we need to know that. So we know in 10 years, then we have to have it within our budget to fix that. Now, I'm not talking about like Miamisburg that has a potential leak. They have to fix that, and they're going to close out. They're going to lose revenue for a whole season, but that's how determined they are to make sure they have a pool that's functional. Then you also have to know the lifespan of the pumps. You have to know the lifespan of the chemical pump systems, and you also have to know the lifespan of the pool heaters.
Can I say something here?
Sure.
If we had a full feasibility study and we could say, okay, here's where the feasibility study says we might want to consider building our aquatic center. And just for the kicks and giggles, let's just say they suggested we place it someplace where there's already plenty of parking, there's easy access to that location. Maybe it's already one of our 31 existing parks that we decide to make this the thing about that park. Then you strategically plan how you're going to pay for and what quality you're going to get to pay for all of those things. But until you know the bare bones of it, you can't really put the budget together. I mean, until I know the quality of the water, I wouldn't know which chemicals will work best. But the prices are this far apart.
Understood.
At this point,
So-
I'm just want to say that we have reached the end of your presentation, so we're now open to questions for both the YMCA and for her. Just wanted to say so that you can look at time.
And I just want to make one more statement.
Okay.
And this is all due respect to your group. I've lived here the majority of my life. I'm 54 years old. We've had 3 pools: Douglas, Sunset, and Yankee. They're all closed.
Yeah.
We have splash pads, and from the information I'm given, those are a challenge. So I am having a lot of doubts about us going back into the pool business as a city.
And we aren't asking you to go back into pool business because pools are passé.
Aquatic
Pools
Center.
were from when people didn't have air conditioning.
Yield back to you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Horn. Do we have any other questions or comments for either Mr. Roberts or Ms. Scherer at this point?
I have a question for you, and thank you for your time and your presentation. And I've looked at some of the feasibility studies and market studies and stuff, and they all come back typically with a firm recommendation, like, yes, because this is a quality of life thing. I mean, every community, and like you even said yourself, surrounding communities are like, yes, please build it, right?
Please build it, yeah.
And I'm a
quite
firm
frankly,
believer.
they all quoted to me how many kids they have that have nothing that's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer in investing in the next generation. I feel like, for a lot of years, and it's not Middletown specifically, but our country as a whole, we haven't really made the investments in our kids. And this is a great quality of life thing. It's experience. Not to go on a tangent, but the mayor and I went, to the ice rink the other day. 242 kids from Creekview showed up. It was an incentive. They got their MAP test scores up, and they got on the ice, spoke to a few of them. I mean, they're skating better than I ever could, and some of them learned how to skate last year on that same field trip. So, I mean, I'm a firm believer that quality of life things that we can do as families, but especially that are more focused towards our youth, are something that I think we're poised right now to make some key investments. But when I look at some of the feasibility studies and market, research reports and things like that, when we look at Middletown specifically, I think the average aquatic center might be 3 to 5 acres, give or take some parking and things like that, and also the amenities, right, that are included. In your minds, where do you think, what sites would be even a potential to put that type of footprint? Like, what would be a turnkey site as far as, you don't have to knock a building down or?
Well, of course, when this all began, my first interest was in the park right here because I was there all the time with my grandkids playing soccer, and I'm like, this is just a wonderful park. And I eat my lunch there at least 3 days a week while I watch planes and jumpers and all of that.
To be clear, I just want to say
But
that she means
that is
Smith Park.
very much a soccer place. Now, Oxford had exactly the same issue in that they wanted to build their aquatic center where their soccer people were. And so they have 2 concession stands, one that's accessible to the soccer fields and one that's only accessible from the pool. That's how they solved that. Another really the center of Middletown is moving out. I don't think that splashdown should be as far out as, say, the atrium, but perhaps somewhere around Jayco Park would be a good location. I mean, we used to have a derby course there. So people are used to being there for something other than soccer. That's another very beloved soccer field. I go there, if I'm on the East End when it's time to eat lunch and go through the drive-thru and get my lunch and sit at that park and watch people walk and do what I wish I could still do around that trail around there. But that's why I think the feasibility study is so important, because they will take what they know about all of our locations, any green space we have, whether there's a parking lot close by or not, and tell us where would be the best place to put it.
I have a question also about cost, and because it does sound like a lot of the questions would be answered with the feasibility study, which we absolutely do not have. But how much what would this cost, and how are you recommending that it's paid for? What is the ask of the city for the actual aquatic center?
I personally think, because I write business plans for a living, that if we had a feasibility study that told us the answers to the demographic portions of our population, if we put it here, it would be this simple for them to get here, for them to get here, for them to get here. For people in all these other communities, they're most accessible if we're down closer to downtown than if we're further out from Monroe, from Franklin, from Trenton, from Madison. But I think we could take that feasibility study and go with that study to corporations and foundations and say, okay, here's what we need. We need this many $1 million to build this, and here's where we're going to build it, and here's why we want to put it here, and here's the people that would be easily accessible to it. If we could do that, we would get foundation and corporations and people like that to support us. I also think, I know, that all of the equipment that you use when you build an aquatic center is under warranty for 5 years. So what you do is you get a corporation which about 2.5 years ago said, okay, we would probably do that for you, would put away $500,000 or $1 million in an escrow account, and it would never be tapped unless something major happened to the aquatic center that wasn't covered by warranty. Then they would pay for that. I don't know if they'd still go for that. They've now changed how they have people applying for grants, but I'd be happy to do that begging again.
Are you saying you did ask?
I did. And they said, well, yeah, we'd consider doing that for you, but we weren't this far down the road at that point. We couldn't get a nod from the city to say, we think this is a good idea, research it. If you don't get a nod, you can't get people to take you seriously.
Based on other cities, based on other aquatic centers that you've researched, do you have a generalization, like how much this could cost, ballpark, not holding you to that figure, but what's the idea? Can you give us an idea about building?
The community that I know about that just they have $1 million. They can't be touched for anything except repairs to the aquatic center beyond what was covered by warranty. I have no idea how much money it will cost Miamisburg to fix their leak. I don't have any idea. But I would think with good maintenance, $1 million is a pretty good cushion.
I meant to build.
Huh?
I meant to build from scratch, from the ground up. Any idea from?
It depends on how many amenities you put in it and whether you have to put in the $600,000 parking lot as well. But I would say between $4 and $6 million would put all of the amenities that Oxford has and make sure that our pool is 50 meters and 25 yards so that it meets those two criteria for two different types of swim teams to use it, which is a flood of income. I don't have a minute's doubt that an aquatic center here will make money every year. Because we know how to market it, we know how to use it.
So Adrian, really respect you guys. I've talked to you guys for 2+ years now. So just a couple things to point out. I did a quick search of the Miamisburg pool here on Google. And I go to an article in October of 2021. Miamisburg decided to do a small upgrade to their aquatic center. Cost of equipment, $161,302. Cost of installation, $178,832, to be capped at $400,000, paid out of the capital improvement plan fund from the city. That is taxpayer dollars. The next year, they have a large pool leak of water. Well, guess what? When you lose water, when you lose money, how do you make that up? You raise everybody's water fees long term. The mayor at that time said that they didn't have to raise them right away, but ultimately, if a city's losing money somewhere, they have to make it up somewhere else. So everybody in the city's tax dollars ultimately are going to go up. I talked to a couple of the cities that you did talk about to where these pools, these aquatic centers, they do make money. Yes, however, they have a fully built out staff on the other end. So they're making money on one end, but they're transferring the debt. If you want to look at an accounting sheet, you have credits, debits. So they're making money, yes, but they're getting debts in other places. They have an $80,000 per year person that runs their parks department that is helping run the pool, for example. So maybe the pool makes $20,000, but they lose $80,000 on the other side. And I agree with you, yes, if you look at a lot of these centers, they do make money the first few years because you have no long-term cost to them. But once the first few years dry up, that's when you start losing money. Now, if it was, can the city take on an expense of this if somebody else were to build it and give us $6 million? Yeah, we can probably make that work. If I'm not mistaken, I definitely could be wrong about this, but I know Miamisburg, when they got their new aquatic center, they got a large grant from a company, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not swearing to that.
I think it was the Mound.
Yeah.
The Mound had radio activated lots of people and gave them
Right.
money. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, if somebody wants to write the city a check for $6 million today, sure, let's do this and we'll figure out a way to maintain it. But I truthfully, I'm trying to be realistic and logical here. I don't think that's going to happen. So at that point, yes, we can afford to put a $2 million endowment or a $2.5 million endowment to handle this long term. But we can't do both. Once again, we're not a rich city. And I love this idea, right? I would love to have it right in the middle of Middletown. But I also looked at what other cities do that work. This either needs to be right off an interstate or it needs to be right off a bike path. The cities that are most successful with this, that's what they do. I've called 20 different cities. I've talked to their aquatic directors. That's the number one thing, is it has to be off a bike path or off an interstate. The parents have to drive them there if you want to pull people from outside, or they have to be able to ride a bicycle there. And that's the problem, is we don't have the park that's set up for that. And yes, we can hire a feasibility study to get done, but it just doesn't exist. I mean, I've driven around town, maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see it. So that's kind of where I'm at with things. I appreciate you guys, but I look, Miamisburg Pool, once again, 2021, let's spend funds on this. 2022, we have 2022 and 2023, we have a major pool league.
That was since 1997.
Okay.
That was 20 years of no expense.
But you earlier in your presentation said that the taxpayers aren't paying money. It's not
Well,
losing
if we had
money.
$1 million and
But you're losing money on one end, but you're making, so if I make $20,000, that's great. But if I lose $200,000 on the other side, that's still a loss.
Well,
Taxpayers are still
actually,
responsible.
okay,
Oh, could I mention one thing also, though? A couple things, just to point out taxpayer dollars, because we were talking about how we would pay for the other project as well, and that was ARPA funds and some other general funds, I believe you said. We said we had up to $7.5 million. That's also taxpayer dollars. That's technically the money of the residents. So it's kind of the same thing if you look at it that way. I just wanted to make that statement. But
I think he was looking at from an operational.
here's a question I would like to
maintenance.
ask everybody on this
building.
council.
What's that?
Is it worth $25,000 to get professionals that we have counted on over and over and over in this community to tell us how much money we need, where we need to put it, what the quality of the water is, all of those questions? $25,000 is really nothing compared. We could then answer all these questions. That's what our board, which has been dying to do for 3 years, would do. We have the feasibility study in our hand. We'll come up with the budget and the money. If we don't, you're delayed 90 days. I'm just asking.
Are
And
there
I'm
any,
appreciating your time.
thank you. Are there any other questions for either Ms. Scherer or Mr. Roberts at this time?
Oh, I did have one more quick question for you, Mr. Roberts, on the YMCA from like an operational standpoint. What is your policies on underage? Do they have to have a parent, guardian, adult with them?
Yeah, so what we operate under, we do want a emergency point of contact for everyone that's within that pool to keep everybody safe. And so our operation at the YMCA is to be able to be at the pool by yourself. You need to be able to pass the swim test, and you need to be over the age of 10 at that facility. So for us, with that emergency contact on file, that's what it would take for you to be at that facility. Anyone under that would need to have a parent or guardian, even if they can pass the swim test, on site with them at the pool.
Okay, thank you.
I had another question for you. We were talking about memberships to the Y, and you broke that down very well. And I was curious, would families or individuals need to buy a year-long pass, or would you also be offering just a summer pass, for example, a shortened one, maybe 3 months?
Well, we wouldn't even lock you into 3 months. It's a month-to-month membership. If you came for a month and you felt like, hey, you got your value, that's what you needed, month of June, that's what worked well for your family, you're able to term that membership within those 30 days, as well as at the end of that summer. So for us, we don't even lock you in for that full summer. What we're hoping that we create a good enough experience that you'd like to stick around with us, maybe even after the summer, and take advantage of some family programming and some other activities for you and your family.
One more question, childcare. What age range does childcare work at the Atrium YMCA?
6 weeks to 12 years old is our traditional licensed childcare, but then we go beyond that with teens as well.
So if a family wants to show up and the 1-year-old can be handled by childcare, and then the 8 and the 12-year-old can go out to the pool with the parents?
Yes,
per se.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, in our child watch program, absolutely.
Okay, and then once again, this is all inclusive. So if I show up with my kids and one of them wants to go to the aquatic center, one of them wants to play basketball, and the other one wants to work out, it can be all inclusive for a family,
Yeah,
correct?
you'd have full facility access.
Okay.
Does this work on the weekend also?
It does, and I anticipate the pool even exceeding some of our operational hours as well, especially on like days of the week, like Sundays and Saturdays and things like that. Try to keep the pool open as long as possible, as long as we have daylight visibility and safety concerns.
No, I mean the childcare.
Yeah, so what we tried to do is always try to mimic our child watch hours for those members, that member benefit of being a member of the YMCA, that child. We try to mimic that with the program. So wherever the demand might be that summer, we try to mimic that for the best need for those we're serving. So it can fluctuate and increase over the summer.
Are there any further questions for either Ms. Scherer or Mr. Roberts? I'm just going through some of mine. So based on the location of the atrium, and I did have this question, is Warren County going to be paying anything into this as well because of the location of it?
We have not had any direct conversations with Warren County ourselves as the Great Miami Valley YMCA, so I can't speak to that. Per our kind of proposal, it would not include Warren County dollars, but they could be at play. I do know that there has been other conversations with Warren County, but the YMCA has not been privy to those.
I can tell you in the past in council and talking with Butler County leaders, Warren County leaders, there was no interest on their side as far as investing into this.
That's too bad. Okay. Is this is the only funding waiting for this project to get started would be the ARPA or funds from Middletown? That's it? That's all you're waiting for?
Yeah, that's what we'd be waiting for, and as soon as that, we'd be able to jump onto that schedule in February or March to be able to get on that 2025 schedule. Because anything beyond that, even waiting 90 days, it's not 90 days, it's a full year that you'd be waiting to begin permits, shovels in the ground, to be able to get on the schedule with some of these pool projects and some of these companies.
Okay. And I'm sorry to ask you to stand up again, but I did have a question for Ms. Scherer as well. Do you want to, I can repeat your answer if you want to sit there.
Actually,
Sure.
she doesn't have to get up.
Turn that mic towards your.
Okay.
Is it on?
There you go.
There you go.
I do, thank you. Can she be heard? Can you speak a little bit so I can see if you can be heard?
If it's up, Dora, it's on.
If I was singing, I'd have to be really close to the mic.
There you go, thank you. One of the things that the Atrium Y talked about was the price daily. I know, again, we don't have a feasibility study. Would there be the possibility of, do you have any idea how much, without a feasibility study, just an idea of how much membership would cost families, or if there would be the possibility of discounts for Middletown residents versus non-residents, that kind of thing?
The way I understood it when I talked with the professionals of Bratstetter and Carroll, they would take the demographics of our community and tell us if we were going to meet the needs of the community, what our summer memberships, if you had a summer pass, could cost, and what our demographics could afford, and what a daily pass should cover. And then we would look for the money to make up the difference in that if our demographics indicates that we couldn't really charge enough money to make that money at the end of the summer. So without that feasibility study, I can't really tell you that, but I do know that the demographics of our community would most likely recommend that we have a very reasonable summer rate and a maybe less reasonable day rate for people that come from other communities with different demographics. Like, for instance, I live in Monroe. The average child in Monroe could afford to pay more to come and swim all day than some of the average children in this community. So, like, for instance, my son and I used to be involved in the hockey program at the Kettering Rec. And people who signed up for hockey and didn't live in Kettering paid more to play hockey than they did if they lived in Kettering. So I think because Kettering had passed a levy to pay for that hockey rink, and so they got a better deal. So you just set all of that up based upon the demographics of your community when you set it up.
One last thing, I was, just before we close out tonight, because we have a few more minutes before we're going to end, it looks like the splashdown from these pictures that you showed, sounds like that's kind of what you're thinking could be possible for Middletown. So it looks like this would be much, much larger in scope than the Atrium Y, is that correct? Atrium Y would be two slides, you said, and like the jungle gym apparatus. And this would be lane pool, slides, lazy river, looks like concessions as well. So it's a much bigger.
They actually have a party room in the middle between the two concession stands, which is pretty interesting. And somewhere around 7% of the money they make every year in the summer is because children have birthday parties there, and then all the children who came to the birthday party paid for a day pass to get into the pool, and bridge clubs come and play bridge, and then they take all the kids out of the water for 15 minutes so all the senior bridge players can go walk against the lazy river. And so they utilize that. So their footprint was closer to 6 acres because they added an extra concession stand. They have that extra room for the parties, which I think is a good idea. And they have something I like, but isn't really very helpful as far as aquatic goes, is they have a large concrete area that is raised where the mothers can drag their chairs up there, and then they're raised up about 2.5 feet so they can look down into the pool and watch their children. Well, at a board meeting just last week, one of the board members said, well, Adrian, as much as you love entertainment and to bring entertainment to places, put electricity in that raised area. When people have parties, they can actually have music. And I was like, see, we're still thinking after 3 years.
All right.
So,
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments from council?
If I could answer.
Oh, yes.
A little bit portion of that
Please.
question as well. So, and again, this is going off of memory, if memory serves me correctly, that the Oxford pool there was built around for about $4.8 million. That same pool today, Patterson's Pools is who built that pool, who's also who bid this project as well. That pool's like $8 to $10 million now for that exact pool that they have built over at Oxford. For us, this is something that the pool that we have put up is something that we put based on what we feel like is feasible, but there is room for scale for that. So we're also open to a more robust park, but this is what we feel like we can own and operate based on if we were able to have the funds that was provided to us in a number. So we're open to scale, but also just to understand that the pool to that scale is about an $8 to $10 million pool.
Is there space for it out there as well? If you decided to scale up?
There is room for scale. There's not 6 acres room for scale, but there is definitely room for scale that's going to be an attractive model.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at this time from council? Questions or comments?
I was just there.
All right, you might want to turn the microphone off, just saying. All right, well, thank you so much, very much for your time, everyone that came out tonight, everyone who's watching, council. Thank you so much. Thank you for the presenters. You did a wonderful job. I think it's great now for the public to have time to absorb this information, kind of think about this, and communicate with us. So to that end, I would like to invite any emails to our clerk of council if you have any opinions or you want to tell us anything. That is Amy Skank, and her email address is Amy S, that's A as in Apple, M as in Mary, Y, S as in Sam, at cityofmiddletown.org. Amy S at cityofmiddletown.org. Be interested in what you were going to say. So therefore, I think we are done for the night. Thank you so much. And I will go ahead and say that concludes our work session on aquatics in Middletown for Tuesday, January 9th, 2024 at 7:30 p.m. This meeting is adjourned until Tuesday, January 16th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. in these chambers for a regular city council meeting. Thank you and good night.
Operators are standing by.